folks, I'm Tom Vasel, and welcome to Top 10 List here today. I've decided to do this one on my own just because I play a lot of dungeon crawlers, and I wanted to give you my top 10 dungeon crawlers. There's a lot of these that are out there, and I like a lot of them, but there's a lot that I'm not a huge fan of. Now, there's also several I haven't played, and you might say, where is such and such a game? And maybe I haven't played it, but I thought I would just list my 10 favorites. Now, these are not necessarily dungeons. It could be in the future, but it's the same idea. Usually some sort of a party of people going through and fighting together against monsters or aliens or whatever they might be. And of course, this list could change tomorrow with a new one. Let's find out. So here we go. Number 10 for me is Cutthroat Caverns. This game from Smirk and Dagger Games, this is kind of the loosest one. I mean, you technically are going through a dungeon and you're fighting big, mean, nasty monsters. I mean, they're like pretty ferocious, horrific things. Except that you aren't so much so. You're all fighting the monster and you're all trying to be the one to do the finishing blow because they're the only one who gets experience points. It's called Cutthroat Caverns for a reason. It's mostly done with cards. There's not like an actual dungeon on the board. You just see each monster as you go through each room, but it's entertaining. Number 9 is Mice and Mystics. Now, I considered putting Stuffed Fables on here because they're both very similar. Mice and Mystics has more of the dungeon crawl. In fact, you actually have the mice and stuff with swords and bows and magic, and you're going around and fighting cockroaches and rats and things like that. Technically, you're humans who have been changed into this. This is a great game for kids. And so is Stuffed Fables from the same people. But Mice and Mystics, if you want a great story, very strong story, cool little plastic mice miniatures as you're going around and collecting weapons and fighting, great family-based dungeon crawler. Number 8 for me is Arcadia Quest. Now listen, Arcadia Quest is one of my favorite games of all time. But it's lower on this list of dungeon crawlers because Arcadia Quest is a dungeon crawl to some degree. You're going through and fighting monsters, but the monsters are kind of walking around like, hey, it's the other players you're going after. This is a very competitive game, and then dungeon crawl's almost in the background as you're like going after each other. But you still level up, you still get loot, and you go to the next level, and there are bigger and badder monsters in it. Great miniatures, a lot of fun. If you want a chibi dungeon game, Arcadia Quest is fantastic. Number 7 is Star Wars Imperial Assault. This game, based on the Descent game, takes place in Star Wars. I always wanted a game like this, and it's fantastic. There's so much content for this. Darth Vader shows up, Luke Skywalker, but you don't actually play those characters. You play kind of sideline characters that are very similar to them. You have a female character who's very similar to the Han Solo archetype. You have someone who could be a Jedi, and you go through. One person plays the bad guy, someone plays the good guys. There's also an app where you can all play against the app together as a cooperative game. But if you've ever wanted to go through Star Wars and fight through a group setting with some pretty interesting choices along the way, this is a good one. Number 6 is Thunderstone Quest. Now, this one is the 3rd edition of the Thunderstone deck building game. And normally I wouldn't put a deck building game on a list of a dungeon crawl, but Thunderstone Quest does a really good job. It has a huge plethora of monsters to go through, and you work together. No, you don't work together. You're working apart, but you're basically making your own deck of heroes and stuff, and then using them to go through this dungeon. And it really feels like a dungeon crawl at this point. It really feels like you have everything working together to get through, and I really like it. Number 5 is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. Now, again, this isn't really a dungeon crawl. You're just going through houses and creepy places, but there's monsters and all that get out. And you are ordinary people who, maybe you're smart, a librarian, or you got a gun or whatever, but you're walking through a house and rifling through drawers and looking through things, and then monsters burst out and you have to fight them. Very scary. The app helps. There's puzzles. I mean, it's really a dungeon crawl just set in the 1930s. Number 4 is Descent. 2nd edition. Now, Descent, the 1st edition was a lot of fun, but the 2nd edition really upped the ante. And even though Star Wars Imperial Assault is built on this and has a lot of better mechanisms, I still just like the Descent universe. I like the humongous plethora of monsters that are involved, the bosses. There's so much content in Descent, you will never see it all. I mean, if you have all the expansions and everything like that. And it is so much fun. I've played a lot of Descent over the years, and this is the most pure of all the dungeon crawlers on the list. Number 3 is a brand new one called Madara. Madara is a Japanime, Japanese animation style dungeon crawl that I Ascent had a huge amount of content. This is even more, and it's just in one box with a book of 500 plus pages. So many different ways to customize your characters. Hidden things as you go through the game and find them. There's just so much content, and it has some really neat ways of fighting, but it's just a huge amount of choices that are bringing this one into my top 3. Number 2 is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shadows of the Past. Yeah, Dungeon Crawl, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This one's a great teamwork style game where each of the players who's not playing the bad guys is one of the turtles, or if you get the expansion, some of the other stuff, and you are working together, rolling dice, and then using each other's dice. It's so good, and each section is kind of short and fast and fun, so you can just play one session or go through a whole storyline. And then my favorite dungeon crawler, currently still the top rated game that there is, and that's Gloomhaven. Now, Gloomhaven's very puzzly in nature. There's a lot of stuff going on in it, but the mass amount of just options and so much content, but it's the most strategic of all these games. When you go through a dungeon, it's kind of like a puzzle. It's definitely very hard, but the upgrading paths are so rewarding. It's in a very unique, interesting universe that's not very similar. I mean, like Descent, for example, it's kind of like Dungeons & Dragons, like a sideways move. Gloomhaven is very different than that. The characters and classes and stuff feel very unique and different. It is a fantastic game. So those are my top 10 dungeon crawls. There are many other ones out there. Omega Protocol, there's Kingdom Death Monster, Massive Darkness. There's a lot of these different board games that are like this. Tell me what your favorites are in the comment. These are my 10 favorite dungeon crawlers. Until next time, I'm Tom Vasel. I'll see y'all later.